Murtaza, thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
I've been very excited to speak with you because Gen AI has been a very large topic. I feel like 2023 was dominated by talk of AI, and I look forward to discussing that with you. But before we get started, please introduce yourself.
My name is Murtaza Haider. I am a professor of management at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Toronto Metropolitan University. I am director of the Urban Analytics Institute, and I write a weekly column for National Post on the economics of cities.
Yeah, sounds great. And you have a lot going on. And I'm sure that that's given you a very good view into what we've been experiencing for, I suppose, some of the hype started with ChatGPT's launch in December of 2022, and since then it's just gone off. But you mentioned that you're a professor, so let's start there. I guess first we should start with like what is AI? What is Gen AI? Do you want to define those terms so that everyone's on the same
Absolutely.
topic?
Again, because we are in the infancy of this field, I don't think we would have definitive definitions for it because the field is evolving. But essentially, the application of deep learning algorithms to create answers, to find solutions, to be able to mimic human thinking, to be able to mimic human speech. That's the generative AI, or to be able to classify and categorize things. So, for example, now that we're looking at it and we realize ChatGPT and others have brought this to people's attention, but back, let's say, go back 10 years, and eBay had these deep learning algorithms that were looking at the materials, things that you were looking at. Let's say you are on eBay and you saw a shirt with a certain color, certain texture, and a certain pattern, and you liked it and you were about to bid for it, but somebody else got it and you didn't get it. Because they had these deep learning algorithms that were able to actually find other material, other alternatives that were on eBay that resembled your choice of color, resembled the patterns that you liked, resembled the cloth or the cutting that you liked. And they were able to then propose to you saying, hey, you missed that, but here's another one that you can bid for. So again, deep learning, machine learning, neural networks, these are the tools that have enabled us to come up with intelligence or artificial intelligence. And it's still in the infancy. Well, if people are scared, they're scared with a 1-year-old child. Wait till it becomes an adult.
It makes sense. And as we discussed again, this is a constantly evolving field. There are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different players who also don't fully agree on everything. And so, given that misalignment, it is quite broad to your point, and there is no narrow definition for any of it. But you mentioned that you're a professor, so let's start there. Like, from the academic perspective, what are you seeing in terms of AI? How is it being utilized, and what are some of the expectations?
So, universities, though claim to be at the cutting edge of technology, they're actually reluctant to adopt technology, and often they find ways to push the implementation to a later stage. So at this stage, if you look at universities across the world, some are restricting any use of AI, such as ChatGPT. Others are cautious about it. Some are encouraging. So essentially, let's say academia, they are concerned that students can use these tools to come up with solutions for assignments and submit them as theirs. And this way we wouldn't be able to confirm or validate that they have learned what we wanted them to learn. So the aspect of our job that relates to assurances of learning, that we can assure that you have learned something, we wouldn't be able to do so if students are able to submit convincing deliverables as assignments, as exams, and that were taken or completed by computers. So yes, there is a genuine reason to be concerned about it, but at the same time, it's such an enabling tool. It frees us from these mundane, repetitive tasks. So setting up assignments or grading them, automate their grading could free up so much of hours, hundreds of hours of students or TA times and whatnot. So again, there are those who are afraid of it. Probably these were the same people who were afraid of the calculator when the calculator was invented. They said, no, you should continue using slide rule and calculators are bad. And there are those who think that there's a genuine threat that generative AI poses, where we would be unable to differentiate between an individual's work or what the work was that they submitted was done by a computer. So again, it's very early in the game. and it's very difficult to know which side will prevail. But looking at the past 500 years of technological innovation, I don't think there's any chance that we will be able to keep AI outside. It will come in, it will dominate, and we have to find ways to be productive with AI and to be relevant in the presence of AI.
That makes sense, but I'm a bit wary of AI. So when ChatGPT first came out, I was one of the early on people that got on there, and it was exciting. I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. Like I'm just literally typing in words and it's responding back to me with relevant information. But you can see that there's a lot of room for abuse with that type of thing. And so there is this question of ethics. And, you just brought up the idea of a calculator. And I would say that it's important for people to learn the fundamentals. So for instance, learn how the concept of addition works. Instead of just going and like typing in 2 + 2 into a calculator, you should know how you get to 2 + 2. And that is one of my fears, is that we may lose some of that. I feel like there's so much possibility, but I feel that we need to have a good, solid approach onto how we're going to allow these technologies to come into our societies, just because we do still want to retain a certain way of life.
True. I mean, look, every technology would have the potential to be abused. A kitchen knife is a good example. The purpose is to cook, make food, and whatnot. But then again, a lot of domestic violence involves violence with kitchen knives. Baseball bats are amazing tools to entertain people, but again, blunt force trauma, and you see baseball bats. So again, you're looking at very essential tools that have been abused for violence and whatnot. So the intent of a technology or a product cannot automatically limit all possible misuses of that product. So I'm using knife and a baseball bat as a metaphor, but you can also see how it relates to artificial intelligence, the tools that are becoming available and are evolving. Now, you say that there are certain things that we would like to maintain. And one such struggle that schools are having now and over the past 20 years is recursive writing. When we were young, when I went to kindergarten and junior school and whatnot, I was taught how to write and how to write cursive, and it was a big part of my early childhood education, right? And then there were people who were there at that time, even today, believe that writing by hand has a different way of committing information to your mind, and you are able to retain it longer. But then now, I look at my own children, I look at everybody else. Kids are very comfortable with computers, with cell phones, and they're typing faster with thumbs and whatnot. So are they going to be less intelligent than us, who learned how to write on a piece of paper and a pencil? I don't know. I don't think we have done that kind of studies to see if the students who never learned how to write excessively by hand were any less intelligent, but we would like to maintain that way of life, for instance. That's a different thing. But the material question is that if children lose, let's say not just reduce, but lose completely the ability to write with hands, and that just go on with lives typing, will they be any less intelligent? Will they be any less sympathetic? Will they be any less passionate? Will they be any less productive? Will they be any less conscientious citizens? I don't know. I mean, we associate a lot of these things with just writing and say this makes people better. But over time, we'll see. Maybe there's truth to it. I don't believe it, but I don't have definitive answers.
Yeah. Well, those are fair questions. And I feel that part of the issue with this for some folks, the struggle, is that it's happening too quickly, right? It sort of came and it just dominated. And again, like I look at the financial industry, for instance, and everyone wants to evaluate it, but I see good utilization there, where it's like, because we have a lot of like repetitive tasks, a lot of duplicates, and we want to be able to remove those and streamline operations and become more efficient. Mm-hmm. And I completely understand that, and I feel it makes sense. But I try to be fair and look at it from various sides. And so I can understand the hesitation, because I have a bit of it myself, admittedly. But my hesitation is mostly around how it's going to affect the lives of people, and how it may not be for the best of everyone. And like a good example of this is even like data aggregation, right? Mm-hmm. This will make it so simple. And now pretty much you're going to have an entire profile of someone right at your fingertips within minutes. And is that a good thing?
Well, let's take financial institutions as an example. In 1994, 95, I worked for one on the trading floor. It was one of the largest trading floors in Canada. And the reason I was hired was that that trading floor on the desk that I was on had hundreds of thousands of executed trades, but they have not been able to collect the commissions that the participating brokerages owed to them. So, when you execute a trade, you get a commission, they get a commission, but this particular brokerage had not done a good job in recovering. And that outstanding commissions, they were in millions of dollars, right? Okay, so now that's a challenge. So they hired me to look into it. And the way it was happening is that I would receive papered, printed records of trades, which I would enter into a computer. Then I will analyze them and then figure out who owns us what. That's how the technology was working at that sophisticated workplace. Then I went up to them and I said, why are you giving me this data in papers? You're printing it, so you already have it computerized. Why don't you just give me all of that data for how many years of backlog data, and I'll work with it. So they gave it to me instead of on paper, and that's like 4 people working with paper, right? Mm-hmm. They said, okay, they just took a chance. They gave me the data. I brought it into a database at that time, and then in a matter of a week, I analyzed backlogged years of trades and printed the invoices and gave it to them in a matter of 2 weeks. Now, that's what technology does. That's something that had accumulated as a backlog because they were doing it the hard way or not embracing the technology. And it took them, and every day that they would move forward a day, they would be backlogged by another 2 days. But technology, adoption of technology, just giving up paper and just focusing only on digital data, we were able to catch up in a matter of weeks. Is that a bad thing? And the financial institutions will try to optimize the use of technology, including AI. They're not the best at adopting things. They are very conservative as well because they're afraid. The bigger threat right now is hacking, cybersecurity. That's a significant threat all financial institutions, all large institutions face. So they would be very careful in adopting the tools that become available from artificial intelligence. I think at this stage, the adoption rate would be slow, even though we see things are happening very fast. But I would say it would take many more years before you would see AI embedded in the financial side of the financial institutions. You may see chatbots. You already know they're chatbots because there's a limited number of answers that a chatbot has to respond to. So they are already in place without even AI. There's simple tools that they can use, and then you will see more of those, that they will replace human responders with these chatbots, and that's how it's going to go forward. But at the end of the day, will artificial intelligence be running some very heavy-duty decision-making in financial institutions? Maybe, but not today, not next year. It's going to be far. I don't know how far, but it's going to be far in the future.
Well, they've already had some AI and ML, particularly like for back office activities and mid office, because again, that's just a lot of there's a lot of manual work that can be cut out, a lot of duplications, and that is an effort to streamline. So I feel that there's actually like a lot of good applicability for different companies, be it the financial industry or other industries, to utilize AI because it'll free up people to focus on other tasks instead of to your point, like maybe going through like invoices or going and checking transactions and double and triple checking.
So I'll give you another example. And again, I'll tell you how it works and how it won't work. A lot of people of color, immigrants, visible minorities, they face increasing challenges in getting jobs. And one of the concerns they have is that if their names are unfamiliar, so hiring managers, when they see a CV, their first thing they notice is the name. And if the name is difficult to pronounce, if the name is difficult to spell, there's a reluctance. And that's not an explicit reluctance, but then again, that's where it starts. Academic papers have been written about it. What they have done is they've taken the same CV, just changed the name, same credentials, and see how many people would get a call if they had a Western-sounding name versus someone who had a non-Western-sounding name. Right? There's a lot of academic literature that shows this. The question is, what if we replace humans with biases, with algorithms? artificial intelligence, deep learning algorithms that evaluate the intellectual capital that an applicant is bringing, and then make the decisions based on what they have to offer rather than how their names are spelled. So again, you could see that a machine, when it's not trained to be biased, when it's trained and focused to be just look at the fundamental data, can eliminate all those undesirable outcomes. Again, machines can learn from our biases and could be equally biased, but at the same time, as humans, we don't have the capacity to be unbiased. Machines can be unbiased. We are born with it, and we know some of our cautious biases, but we are unaware of our subconscious biases. So in many instances, I would think that the machine learning algorithms would do a better job in creating equity and creating equal level playing fields. Take redlining as an example in mortgages. In America, it used to happen, I don't know how prevalent it is, in the United States, that they would redline areas, and if someone applies for a mortgage with certain name or certain district, the financial institution would be less inclined to award them or give them the mortgage. You could replace that with algorithms and see if they would be discriminatory as human beings have been in the past. So there are options and ways to make the economic landscape more equitable, more fair, more level playing fields for all. But at the same time, when I've said this, I can also tell you this, that these algorithms are very good at learning our biases because it's human information that they take to mimic. And if we are inherently feeding biased information, these algorithms can be equally biased as we are, because they would not know the difference.
See, so the bias is a really interesting conversation when it comes to this. And I've had this conversation before with other guests. And it really comes down to, like, yes, you can train the system. It can do a phenomenal job. It can be very efficient. But it always comes back to what bias exists. And I still haven't seen a solution for how do you eliminate bias. Because if we're to be completely transparent, even if you go within a particular industry, let's say, it tends to attract people with similar thinking, similar mind frames. And so even if they don't subconsciously mean to be biased, well, guess what? That's just who those people are. That's how they think. That's how they feel. Mm-hmm. And you do sort of get into echo chambers as well, whether it be with your colleagues or, it be with different teams you're with. And how do you eliminate that? And I don't believe that there's a malice intent in any form where some of the people that perhaps are inputting the data are saying, oh, I want it to be biased. I think it is just a subconscious thing. And so how do you eliminate that?
So I give you an example of how that bias exists and how you can eliminate it. And you can try it. Let's say you take an artificial intelligence-powered translation tool. You can go online, and there are several of these browsers and software companies that provide the tools to translate, right? You want to translate. So I give you an example of two phrases from Hindi that you need to have them translated into English. And that will indicate or suggest to you where the biases come from. So if I want to say this person is a doctor and that person is a nurse, I would say in Hindi, wo ek doctor hai, wo ek nurse hai. These two statements have no gender in it. I just said that person is a doctor and that person is a nurse. The way Hindi is constructed it's gender-free conversation. Okay. Now you translate it and try it with any of those translators. It would say wo ek doctor hai would be translated into he is a doctor. And then when you try to translate nurse, you say she's a nurse. Now, how did the software know, or this algorithm know, that if it's a doctor, it has to be a male, or more likely to be a male? And if it's a nurse, I'm going to substitute she, because I didn't ask or reveal the gender of the person, but the algorithm picked a gender in translation, because you can't say it is a doctor or it is a nurse. You have to pick a gender in English. So that's the indication of a bias. Where did the bias come from? Because the language, the corpus that was used to translate it, use these references again and again and again. They may have used nurse and female genders more frequently than nurse and male gender. But that creates a bias in the way the software or the algorithm operates. But you can limit it. You can say, well, we know this bias now. We can just write one or more lines of code in it and preempt it from actually assigning gender on purpose, or randomize the gender as people would translate. So with the algorithms, Once you know there's a bias, once you know there's a problem, you have the ability to correct that. How do you correct a bias in a person?
How do you, I suppose, first would be to bring light to the fact that there is bias. And then once there's awareness that the bias exists, that person's aware of it, they would usually want to change. I don't believe that there's too many people out there who would intentionally want to remain biased once they realize, oh, actually, this is not the right frame of thinking, or I've miscalculated, or I've misunderstood. So I think it does start with transparency and being aware of the problem.
Yes, in ideal world it works, and in the real world we go to wars because of our biases. It's not that easy. Human beings are very reluctant to change behaviors and the views they form, and it takes tremendous amount of effort and willingness to change. My experience in life is that people are the least likely to change. Computers, you can force them. Algorithms, you can force them to pivot with just a few lines of code, and it's guaranteed that it's not going to behave differently. With human beings, you don't know. And I'm not saying that human beings are inferior to machines or the algorithms. I'm just simply saying that some things work better with machines, some things work better with humans. You can't hug an algorithm. An algorithm won't sit with you and comfort you and console with you when you need someone's help. That's very much human thing. There's part of us is human, which is our brain, and the machines can actually perform the tasks that our brains do. But the other part is our heart, the soul of our being that allows us to empathize with people, that allow us to be of care, to provide this feeling of duty of care that we are able to share with people we know, people we love, and with strangers. And the machines are not good at it. They will never be good at it. So therefore, I think we should just look at which part of the entire spectrum of being alive, being active in this world, what things that humans can do better than machines. Let's focus on those. And what things that, machines can calculate faster than us. That's a known thing. Why bother competing with machines on that? So that's why I think the focus should be where we excel. We excel in compassion. We excel in sympathy. And we excel also in hatred, but that's a different story. But computers can't do that. So I think people who work with their hands, people who are high touch, low tech, their lives will be phenomenal going forward in the age of AI. People who are like me, who program or code, they'll find it difficult to be relevant because computers can code better than us.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And I feel this goes back to creating that harmony between human and machine, because there are things that we are good at and there are things that machines are good at. Yeah. And so what you described is sort of the example of like taking the best of both worlds.
Correct.
So let's, and it's interesting that you brought up that robots can't be caring and affectionate, you said algorithms can't be. You can't hug an algorithm, and that's very true. But robots that utilize algorithms it can be caring in the sense that they can care for your like physical well-being. And
the robotic nurse, for example,
yes.
A machine that brings medicine to you, right? But again, the machine won't hug you, or nor will you try to hug. Look, the physical world that we live in, our pets, dogs and cats, dogs especially, they are an immense source of comfort and care and love. And a dog would not be as smart as a computer or an algorithm, but you will not trade your dog for a robot. That's not going to happen. And that's the reality of it. There's a physical, emotional, psychological being, which we are, which all animals are. And that will continue to function and thrive in the presence of robots and machines and algorithms. I'm not afraid about it. I'm just thinking that we should focus on not trying to do things that machines can do better, and focus on things that machines can do better or can never do.
And that makes sense. That's logical. I suppose then the question is like, people have different opinions. So like, for instance, there's some people who feel that humans shouldn't drive, and that, you should just use auto drive switch to EVs, have auto drive, and just let the machines drive. And I've actually had a few different discussions about this with different folks, because I like driving and it's not something I'm going to give up. So even if, a machine can do it better than me, and I'm not saying it can't, it's still that I, as a human, get a certain enjoyment out of it, and I don't want to give it up. And I feel like we have to be accepting of that. There are things that machines are better at, that you can say they're better at, but people don't want to give up those activities, and so they shouldn't have to.
I agree. I don't think machines drive better than humans at this stage. We're still very far. Like the autonomous vehicle, there are 5 stages of autonomous vehicles. We are not at that level 5 yet. Probably it's very far, far away. Again, the reason being false positives and false negatives that machines can't detect. I was driving an autonomous vehicle few weeks ago, and a raccoon ran across the street, and he didn't see it, and I saw it. So I know where we are with personal experience for autonomous vehicles. But then your argument is, if you like driving, why should you give it up? And that's a fair thing to do, right? Like if the machines can cook better omelets than me, then should I stop cooking omelets? I love making omelets, right? And if somebody designs a foodie machine that does it better, okay, good for it. But then I still would like to do it myself. So I think what makes us happy and what gives us sense of purpose and enjoyment, that what makes us us, would continue to prevail in the age of machines. I mean, think about it. The earliest machines, steam engine, one of the first set of machines that came about in the 17th century that led to the first industrial revolution, locomotives, sewing machine that came in the 19th century, about mid 1800s. Before sewing machines, everybody's clothing was stitched by someone in the family. Right? You wouldn't go to a mall and say, "Hey, I'm looking for buying this." Or no, there were no malls, there were no clothing stores. If you were wearing something, someone who knew you stitched it for you by hand. And then came the sewing machines, and nobody complained. They didn't say, I'd really like to do this needle and thread thing, and it will take me a month to make a simple dress for you, but that's what I won't like to do. If you want to do it, do it. But then again, no one turned away from sewing machines. And that's the earliest 18th century sewing machines or 19th century sewing machines. Now you see how far that industry has come along. So machines have showed up over the past, I would say, 400 years, and they have made our lives easier, simpler, more reliable. Let's look at health. If there's someone who has a problem with a knee, before these advanced algorithms, we would have to operate on the knee. We have to cut it open to see what's going on. Then came these machines, these MRIs and CT scans, and now with machine learning, even better ability to understand and infer information in an MRI scan. Maybe, I'm not saying it is, but maybe better than a physician, that the machine can read the MRI scan better and infer information from it. But without opening up the knee, the ability to scan, the ability to see what's going on inside and then decide whether an operation is needed or not. These have all been technological developments involving algorithms, involving machines that have made our lives better. And telemedicine, people can be administering, there will be soon technology that a physician or a surgeon can operate on someone remotely from Toronto, and the patient could be in Mozambique, right? So these things would enable our lives and livelihoods better. It's just that there would always be concerns. These algorithms can interfere with the political process. They can interfere with justice and equity. There's a possibility that they can do that. But if you keep that aside and you just focus on these algorithms improving things like signal timings, right? So there was a report just a few days ago that Toronto has the third worst traffic in the world. I don't know how they found that about us, but it is true that we have problems. And one thing is that our signals are not fully synchronized. These traffic signals. There are about, I think, 4,000 intersections that are instrumented with traffic signals. But imagine these algorithms that have already been there, but imagine the next generation of algorithms that can optimize signals across Toronto, the city of Toronto. And if there are 3,000 to 5,000 intersections, we optimize their timings in real time to adjust traffic so that you can save a minute here or a minute there. So these are the technologies that will improve our lives, and they've already been improving our lives, making a big difference. And the question for us is whether we would like to embrace them or shun them away. I mean, there is, and I'm not going to name names, but there are people who say, no, we don't need to improve intersections or traffic throughput. Let's make traffic worse in downtown Toronto so people can switch to cars or bikes and whatnot. I don't agree with that. That way of thinking, that if we make people's life worse, only then they would see that they can walk, bike, or take transit. But then again, I would argue that let's make the best use of technology and get more throughput capacity through our road system by moving cars faster and in a secure way.
I completely agree with you on that. I feel, and I believe we were ranked like the worst in North America in terms of commute time because of all these issues that you just described. And yes, the technology can help us and we should utilize it. You brought up a few points, and one of them that I wanted to hone in on for a minute is our demographic changes. And you brought up medicine, and this is very pertinent to that in the sense that we have an aging population and we don't have the capacity to care for them all. And we spoke about robots briefly earlier, but that does seem to be the future where you're going to have robots that take care of a lot of your health needs because our system just unfortunately cannot handle it. So, it's very sad, but I've heard a few stories now of elderly individuals in like different care homes or like different residences. And they'll discover bodies like a few days later. And it's because, and a simple solution to that would be like, maybe you go and like you knock on everyone's door once a day at least and make sure that they're there, or people sign out if they're leaving. Because things like that are not good and they shouldn't be happening. But a part of the issue is, again, the capacity where they don't have the manpower or whatever it may be. They don't have the resources to do those types of things. And maybe you do have robots, it could be as small as like a Roomba robot vacuum, right? And this will be, of course, designed for health needs instead of cleaning. And it'll just patrol the area, make sure you're okay, make sure you're feeling good. Like the fact that our phones and our watches can detect our heart rate, and they can measure even like your blood oxygen levels. If we utilize some of these technologies, and if we have AI helping us, where if there's a trigger for something, this person, it seems like they might be going to cardiac arrest because of these signals that are popping up, then we can get help for that person immediately instead of waiting until something bad happens. And that's just one example. And your other example about using AI to improve traffic by aligning the different traffic lights, I think, is a really good example. It's funny.
Which was the case in New York some 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So Manhattan had figured this out 20 years ago. I lived there in 2001 and 2, I guess. If you are driving in Manhattan on I think it's called Route 10 or something, and you get green after green after green after green. And this is before AI and machine learning. They were able to physically synchronize intersections. And now with all this technology that exists, and it's so inexpensive now, we still haven't done that. But I want to stick to this elderly population for a second. And I'll give you one solution that AI can really help, and then tell you what happens in the absence of it. So let's say we put a camera or cameras in elderly homes, in people's rooms. As long as they're walking, we see they're walking, they're fine. But if they fall or they're not getting up, the camera will detect it and it can alert. But the problem is privacy, right? Like, why would someone give up that privacy that they're moving around and being completely watched in real time? So that's not a good thing. But machine learning can eliminate a human person watching the feed. You can have a machine watch the feed. So an algorithm is watching you, not a human being. So your privacy, in a way, is not compromised. And if you stop moving for a long period, the algorithm will detect, and only then a human being will be alerted. So you can actually replace humans with algorithms and protect people's privacies while they can still move around. So elderly moving around in their room or in their house, and they're being monitored 24/7 by algorithms without any compromise to their secure with their privacy. Now, a little more than a few years, about 10, 15 years ago, there was a heat wave in France. And it's quite a series of unfortunate events that happened. It was a long weekend, and people would go with their families to the south or to the beach, to the water. So people taken their children and were out for that long weekend. And then the heat wave stuck, which means that the grandparents were back in Paris, were back in the cities, and the heat wave happened. But at that time, their children and grandchildren were away for 3-4 days. The first estimate was that about 10,000 seniors perished in that heat wave, over a weekend. Then they revised the estimate, said there were 25,000. Then they came back and said it was 50,000, and I think the number was much, much larger when they accounted for the unexpected deaths that happened during that period, that weekend, and complications, deaths resulting from complications because of that heat wave. If you had any of this AI-based technology, smart monitors, even simple solutions as motion detectors, you would have figured out that these people were in distress and they were alone. Just by coincidence, people were away that weekend, long weekend. There was tragic, excessive death of seniors. Technology provides you with the opportunities to prevent that from happening. It creates other problems, but initially at least, you have simpler solutions using algorithms and sensors and whatnot. Sensors are becoming ubiquitous. Your refrigerators will be equipped with sensors. They will will alert you with a text saying, "Hey, we noticed that you are near a grocery store," and your fridge will tell you saying, "I'm low on milk. By the way, don't forget to buy that." I mean, that's pretty much straightforward from an implementation point of view, the kind of sensors and algorithms you need to detect that instead of 3 bags of milk, you're left with 1, right? And then the machine sends you a text saying you are in a grocery store based on your GPS location. Please pick up a carton of milk. These solutions can make our lives easier. The fridge example is trivial, but saving lives of seniors just by motion detectors and heat sensors and whatnot is much more important. We can save people's life, we can improve the quality of their life, and we can make it easier for them rather than having them taking care of them in hospitals where it's extremely expensive. Even places like Canada do not have the means to treat all the seniors with their complications in hospitals. And when this wave of illness hits us in about 10 years, we are not prepared for it unless we find technological solutions now.
It's sad, but very true. And it sort of goes again back to that point of we can use this technology very effectively. We can use it to better the lives of so many people. And so it comes back to how we utilize it. And there are so many good use cases, and there will always, and we spoke a bit about this earlier, but there will always be room for abuse, and it's a matter of safeguarding. And I feel this is also where ethics comes in, right? That's a big portion of it. And you brought up that camera example, for instance. Like, how do you ethically have cameras? Like, I can very easily understand why people wouldn't want to be monitored by a camera. But again, if there is a serious medical issue, and if you're able to alleviate some of those concerns by saying, hey, a human won't watch you at all unless certain sensors are triggered, and that's only to make sure you're okay. I feel that would alleviate the stress for a lot of people. And it also goes back to, I suppose, building a system of trust where I trust that you're going to do what you're telling me to do. And this is where we bring in some of the regulatory bodies, perhaps. And also, this is where the industry that's going to produce these technologies is going to have to do some work and establish that trust with consumers.
Correct. I mean, if the focus should be that we should align AI and all of the technological developments in parallel with our value system. We should let the values we collectively and personally hold to define the parameters in which modern technologies and artificial intelligence and other algorithms will be implemented. And if there's a one-to-one correspondence with innovation and our value system, I see less of chances of unethical behavior. There will be a tiny minority that will always try to find ways around it. But then again, even before we get to technology, if we raise the next generation with this focus that you have to be ethical, you have to be moral, and there will always be ways for shortcut. If you want to compete in performance sports, don't take these steroids, right? They are there, but don't take them. Be ethical, be moral. So if we build on the ethics and morality of our future generations, we then can trust them that they will be responsible users of technology. There is no technology that I can think of that cannot be abused, but that shouldn't be the case of not using them or developing them.
Very true. I feel that we do need to think a fair bit about how we're raising the next generation. And I've had this conversation before as well, and it's really interesting. Like when we think about all the technology that's prevalent and how it's impacting the younger generations, and we spoke earlier about the example of the calculator and the idea that you should learn the concept of how math works before you just start using a calculator. There's a also really, really big question about critical thinking, where if you decide now that anytime you have a question, instead of taking a moment to think about it, you're going to go onto a search engine and type in, hey, how do I do X, or what does this mean, or why does this happen? It does erode our thinking capabilities. And I was given an example by another professor about what's happening in Scandinavia with misinformation, for instance. So instead of saying, hey, we're just going to protect you with all these algorithms and make sure you're never misinformed and just have warnings on everything, they're starting to teach children in schools that you need to do research and that you shouldn't believe these things. So whatever you see on the internet, do not believe it unless you know for certain, unless you receive information from very reputable sources, and you receive it from various sources. So it's this idea of now fostering this idea of fostering research and critical thinking capabilities, and to just not believe whatever you see. So and we're speaking about AI, and deep fakes are a very real thing, and they're becoming a very big thing. Where recently someone showed me a clip of currently Davos is taking place, and someone showed me a clip of a speech that was made there, and it was completely fake. It wasn't real at all, and I was astonished. I wasn't expecting that, but things like that do emerge. So you do need to teach everyone, particularly at a young age, and have them develop those skills to think instead of just believe everything they see.
Absolutely. Now, misinformation can come in various forms. It could be deliberate, it could be accidental. At this stage of generative AI, it's accidental more common than it wasn't intended to be. So they say that generative AI has a problem called hallucinations. It hallucinates, it makes up things. I think it's more like George Costanza syndrome. Now, if you remember this show Seinfeld, and in Seinfeld there was a character called George Costanza. And there's a very classic scene in that show that as Jerry Seinfeld, the lead in the show, is leaving the restaurant, Josh Costanza stops him for a sec. Hey, Larry. And then he says a line which is phenomenal. It says, hey, Larry, it's not a lie if you believe in it. And that's Josh Costanza's problem for generative AI right now. It doesn't know when it's lying. It just believes everything. So having said that, how do you train people to tell apart what's true, what's false, what's real, what's fake? I'm going through this challenge at the moment. I'm teaching an undergraduate course in research methods, and I'm teaching a doctoral level course in research methods. So on one hand, I've got third year students, and on the other hand, I've got these PhD students who have to take this course with me, which is research methods. And the content is quite different, but the challenge is the same. And the challenge is, how do I teach them to do research at a time when so many other tools have become available? When I was a graduate student at the University of Toronto, I had to go to the library every time to read a journal, and then stand at the photocopying machine and photocopy that paper or article that I had to read, and then bring it back home with me, right? And that's how we did research, physical research. It's a lot of walking, going to the library. If the book is not, I remember writing to a professor in New Zealand by mail, asking her that I heard about a paper she had written. I haven't seen her. If it's true, could you kindly send me a copy? 3 months later, she sent me a copy by mail. That was how things were done. Now, research is different. Pretty much all of the recent last 20 years of intellectual output is available digitally. Students do not need to go to the library to read a paper, to read a journal, to read a journal article, to read a book. It's available to them not just in the university, but at home, even at their cell phone, with their smartphones are able to search the universities. So the question is, information has become readily available. That burden of accessing information, technology has simplified it. But the challenge still remains. How do you know what you read makes sense? How do you know what you read is honestly true? again, going back to academia, we have a large number of papers being redacted now, or being taken back because we found faults with it. Some were accidental, some were deliberate, lying with data and other things. So again, it's not easy to know what you see is truth. I mean, what is truth? I mean, I don't know what truth is. I mean, people have belief, people have faith systems, people know they know the truth, they have the true God, or they have the true sense of beliefs. The other ones, half the world says, no, you don't, right? You look at 7 billion people, 8 billion people, and how they pray and how they believe, and they all believe to be what they believe in is to be true, but the neighbor doesn't agree. I think truth is a very big threshold. And as a society, as collectively humans, we have no clue what truth is. Even without AI, even without these fake deep fakes, we don't know what truth is. If that was the case, we would know which way to pray, which way to do, but we don't. We have difference in political beliefs, we have difference in religious beliefs, we have difference in economic beliefs. We all believe that what we have and what we believe in is true, but the other person doesn't. So thinking that AI would be the reason for these fake or take us away from the truth, it could be only if we know what truth is. And I don't know what truth is.
Well, I feel like that's a bit of a philosophical question, where what is the actual truth? And that's a question that has been asked many, many times through the centuries. And it's a question that will continue to be asked because I don't think anyone knows what the actual truth is. And then the question is, the truth about what, right?
Exactly.
So it's like there's trillions of things out there. What do you want to know the truth about, actually?
Yes.
So,
I mean, if you look at the wars, the past wars, right? There are communities that believe they were the victims of that aggression, and they demand an apology from the aggressors. And those who they are accusing of aggression, they don't think they did anything wrong. And I'm not saying it's a matter of 500 or 5,000 people. I'm talking about millions of people are in this conflict where the aggrieved is asking the aggressor to apologize, and the aggressor says, no, that's not true. We never were responsible for those aggressions. So you ask yourself, if that's the case, is it possible for us to be able to differentiate? I think the trick is to go back to values and go back to our value system, that we will promote anything that improves the livelihood of the society, the ability of the society to heal, the ability of society to act in a cohesive manner. If we bring those values forward, if we say that, my welfare is not just my welfare, I'm better off if my neighbor is better off, right? If that's the case, then you build societies. But if you minus the neighbors and you just focus on your own welfare, then you don't have a society. You have a chaos. You have a mob. So in all these evolutions of systems and societies, and I'm neither expert in any of those, I believe as long as our value system is focused on us rather than me, we do better. And if these algorithms allow us to go in that direction, good. If they take us away from it, then yes, we should resist them.
Right. And I feel like there is a lot of room for AI to actually get us to that area of us, because it can help alleviate a lot of the burdens that people have. And so sometimes, especially if you're living through difficulties, it can be difficult to think about the large collective because you're just focused on your own survival. And so if we can now implement these technologies to help people prosper, that will definitely shift that mindset of I versus we, and it will take us to more of that, perhaps that we area. Again, this is just speculation, but I do believe that part of the self-preservation is a real thing, and part of the reason why there is often a focus on I is because you are trying to protect yourself.
Correct.
That's an instinct that you have inherently, and so then the question is, okay, well, we want to get to that phase of we're a society, we have to do what's best for us, and that's why there's obviously always different topics of, us as Canadians, what do we need? Us as Canadians, how do we improve? And in order to get there, there are a lot of different things that need to be done. And, we've meant one thing that we can work on, for instance, and we've spoken about during this conversation, is the healthcare system. If we fix that, we will alleviate the suffering of so many people, and it will allow them to actually focus on creating a better society for us all and participating in that society, instead of, being worried about their own health and being concerned on whether they'll be able to get the assistance that they need.
Correct.
So within those regards, I feel like there's a lot of application for AI.